first started getting pictures of this buck in early July, and that's when we start checking our cameras for velvet bucks, and we were pretty excited to see him. He's obviously a young deer, but as his rack grew, he showed his potential, and just a really symmetrical, even rack. Just one little kicker off of a G2. That's really the only difference in side to side. And a nice 10-point frame, so we were pretty excited to see him growing up. As it turned out, neither Darren or I ever had an encounter with this deer. We didn't see him in person. And so, knowing that he was kind of laying low and not real visible, we felt like he'd have a pretty good chance of surviving next couple of years, hopefully. After we had tagged out, I had tagged out in early November, November 11th, and then Darren shot his deer the day or two after Thanksgiving. And after that was when we went and checked our trail cameras. And that's when we found out that he had broken his leg really badly. And your heart just sinks when you see that. You never like to see an animal suffer. Hunters have a lot of respect for the animals that they pursue, so we didn't like seeing that. And then kind of the farmer came out in us too. We immediately started thinking, well, what can we do to help this deer survive? We like watching deer just as much or more maybe than hunting them. And so we started thinking, what can we do for this deer to help him survive predators, survive the winter? Our winters aren't that harsh, but cold weather can get you down. And you could already see in those first pictures he had severe infection. It was swollen all the way up to his shoulder. And so the first thing that we thought to do, he was already seeking out food in some of the areas where we'd dumped buckets of corn and had mineral sites. And so we immediately started taking corn there and putting together another gravity feeder. And we put one right in that area where he was already coming to. And you could tell his range had shrunken down. He felt safe, or felt that there was food available there for him, because every day he was showing up at that camera. And we found that out after the fact, of course. And so we set up that feeder hoping that we could help him get by. And it's not out of the question for a deer like that to survive a severe injury. You see all kinds of injured deer surviving, especially a leg injury. If they have 3 good legs, they can survive a lot. So at that point, we kind of thought, well, if he can nurse that along and battle the infection, then he would have a decent chance of surviving. There is a lot of pressure from predators, and so that was a concern too. And then later, as time went on, we thought about possibly just going ahead and harvesting him. Darren and I both used our tags, so we didn't have a chance, but Dad had a tag, so he could potentially go after him. But we weren't seeing him in person. It was all trail camera information, and most of the information that we had from cameras was after the fact, and so we didn't have a real good idea, I guess, that we'd see him. And when he really started deteriorating was after gun season, and so we didn't have a chance to go after him at that point. So, but that's one of the things you got to do too as a hunter, and that showed in Darren's hunt this year. It didn't turn out like he had imagined it at the beginning of the season, but the buck he took, it was evident that he was sick or injured, and come to find out he had a brain abscess and was not acting right for a couple days, and he saw him. And that's an example of seeing that deer suffering, and he decided to do the right thing and go ahead and harvest him and put him out of his misery, but also, if it would have been something that would have been infectious to the herd, take him out. And this is another case. It's just the individual suffering. There's no danger to the other deer, but you don't like to see that animal suffer. And unfortunately, by the time we thought we could help, the deer was too far gone, and so not much we could do. Not long after we set up that feeder, Dad was out checking things and found him dead not far from the feeder. So he had tried to survive, and we almost helped, but he was too far gone. And I'm not trying to make too much of this. He's a young deer, and yeah, he's not a big scoring deer at this point, but he just had so much potential, and we hate to see this happen. Yeah, we like to see deer develop big antlers, and we love to watch that, and that's what our goal is, to hunt them too, and eventually take a high scoring animal. That would be fun, but we like watching these deer just as much as anything. And in fact, lately here, in the last couple of weeks, there's been a really big deer, a deadhead, circulating online, and I don't know what that deer died from, but you can certainly see that he probably maxed out his potential. I think there were several years of sheds, and then finally he died, and the skull and horns were intact and recovered. And that's not this case. Yes, this is a young deer, but he had so much potential. And it's almost worse when they never reach that potential. And so that's why we're kind of bummed about this situation. This was a really nice deer. We felt his home range included our farm, and so we had a good chance of seeing him down the road. But it wasn't to be, so kind of a sad deal. But that happens. If you hunt long enough, if you care about these deer and watch them long enough, you'll see a lot of that happen, unfortunately. So kind of a rough ending to a pretty good season otherwise. And hopefully we'll see these racks drop off. We can have a good shed season and start all over.